Well, good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are in the country. I'm Kelvin and I'm joined as always by my co-host Peter Thorp. Good evening, Pete.
Kalispira, big fella.
Kalispira. Well, daylight savings has once again kicked in, folks. So I'm glad that a lot of you did remember that time slot. So I've got a huge number of people on joined us for the show tonight, which is great. So for Queensland listeners, your time slot's going to move to 5 o'clock instead of 6. Our southern neighbours, of course, are going to stay at 6 o'clock. Otherwise, we push you guys out way too late. The west, you join us at 3, and up in the north and down through SA at 4:30. So just remember those time slots for future radios as we get through daylight savings. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. We welcome our resident tax expert, Darren Hagarty, Director of ABN also. Good evening, Darren.
How are you, gentlemen?
Good, mate. Thank you for joining us. And, of course, our topic tonight...
I was on a few months ago and I didn't think you'd invite me back, but I'm delighted.
Well, mate, not only have we invited you back, but you've actually managed to tame the largest audience we've ever had on Bookkeeper Radio. So I'm not sure if it's your boyish good looks or the topic tonight, but one of them have certainly got people interested.
Whichever it is, I'm going to take credit for it, mate.
Mate, is there any chance it may have gone to your head? I heard this morning there's been a demand for a green room and a bowl of blue jelly beans and a ferret. Is that true?
There is those three things. You also forgot the speaker's fee moving forward, mate.
Speaker's fee. Something wrong with the sound.
All right, before we kick off tonight, just a reminder, it is a bit of a talkback Q&A style show. So we have about 30 minutes of discussion with our panellists tonight, Darren. Of course, the topic is Single Touch Payroll. And in around 30 minutes' time, we're going to invite you to join us. Now, you can do that in a couple of ways. There is a Q&A button on your screen there. So if you want to tap us a note, tap us a question, then we'll start to filter those and try and get through as many of them as we can. Or alternatively, you can join us live for a bit of talkback and just raise your hand. So you've got a raise your hand button on your screen. If you do that, then I'll bring you live onto the panel in about 30 minutes' time when you can ask your question live. All right, so we might kick off the topic tonight, and of course it's Single Touch Payroll. Now, before we sort of get down and dirty in it, I just wanted to give listeners a little bit of an idea of what's happening in the space. So it's pretty much still a work in progress. So it's a lot of moving sands as we speak. So the ATO, government and the software houses are still working together quite closely to deliver a lot of the material over the course of the next several months before we kick this thing off. So Darren's going to share with us a little bit about where the legislation is at. And, mate, we might just start with a bit of an overview of what is STP and why was it introduced?
Sure, mate. Well, look, the genesis of STP actually goes back to a really strangely named bill which went through Parliament in August of last year. It was called the Budget Savings Omnibus Bill of 2016. So that's where the notion of STP first rolled through Parliament. It received royal assent pretty quickly, and that went through on 16 September of last year. What is it in a nutshell? Look, it's really a government initiative, and it's designed to enable businesses to report staff salary and wages, including ordinary time earnings, which is the key notion for superannuation, as well as pay-as-you-go withholding to the ATO, but to report it at the same time as businesses pay their employees. And on top of that, with greater accounting and reporting demands being placed on the super funds, the superannuation contribution information is also going to be reported to the ATO by the super funds when the contributions that have been made to them by the employer have been received. So that's the notion of it. Why was it introduced? Look, there's a number of stated goals that have done the rounds as to why STP was introduced. Reading between the lines of all the government rhetoric, there's probably 5 that stand out to me. So I might just run through those. The first one is, I guess, to provide employees with greater visibility. So whether it's over their total year-to-date salary and wage, or whether it's over their pay-as-you-go withholding amounts, or indeed whether it's over the superannuation guarantee contribution amounts that have been made on their part, it's designed to give the employee greater visibility over all 3 of those things. So certainly that's probably first and foremost in the government's mind. Secondly, I guess carrying with that is enabling employees to be more assured that their employers are meeting their obligations. The greater visibility, in theory, brings the employee with greater assurance over that. Beyond that, it's, I guess, to assist the ATO in better monitoring employers, particularly those that are struggling to meet their pay-as-you-go withholding obligations and their super obligations. And I guess from the government's point of view, that they see that as opening up avenues for earlier intervention than what is currently the case for those employers that are falling behind in their obligations. In terms of simplifying of reporting, that's certainly part of it as well, so that they are looking at getting some kickers in there for employers and trying to leverage the natural business processes that are already in place by employers. And that may lead to actual payment of the pay-as-you-go withholding at the same time as the reporting, but we'll sort of maybe set that to one side for the moment and visit that a little bit later. And I guess flowing on from that, an effort to try and cut red tape. And one way that they're hoping STP will do that is by doing away altogether with the need for employers to issue employees with payment summaries, and in turn with the need to prepare those end of year summary annual reports to the Commissioner. So they're probably the five main goals that stand out to me. You know, out of all of that, I think the super certainly looms loud and proud. The current rates of non-compliance across Australia are pretty well documented, increasingly documented. So I guess the theory with STP is that it puts a lot more information in the hands of the ATO to wave the stick a lot more than what they currently are, and in a more timely fashion to try and improve that compliance level around superannuation.
Mate, I looked up the origins of that really strangely named bill, the Omnibus Bill. It comes from the Latin, which means everything, and is traditionally used by government to bring together a whole hodgepodge of ideas, cram as much as they can into one particular bill, so it slows down and hampers debate, and it's normally used to rush in unpopular legislation. So there it is. It's on the Omnibus Bill.
Omnibus Bill.
Tell us, we're talking about STP, who's caught and by when? There's been a bit of confusion around numbers and dates and things.
Yeah, there has indeed, mate. And look, it centres around a very key definition, to be honest. The legislation introduced a term called substantial employer, and in the first instance, understanding what that term means is the key to working out when STP will apply to an employer. So under the Act, this term substantial employer has been defined as being an employer who on the 1st of April 2018, that's the line in the sand date that they're drawing initially, has 20 or more individuals who were employees of the entity. So 1st of April 2018, so 6 months or so time, if you've got an employer with 20 or more individuals that have been employed in that entity, then you are what they call a substantial employer. Now, the implication of that is that some months later, on the 1st of July 2018, Single Touch Payroll will apply to you. Now, just a couple of, I guess, qualifiers or caveats around that definition of headcount. It is an actual physical headcount as distinct to being, say, a reference to full-time equivalents. So it's literally the number of human beings employed in your organisation, regardless of whether they work 1 hour a week or 40 hours a week. The second thing to note is that it's based on the common law definition of an employee. And the best way of sort of getting behind that definition is to look at an old superannuation guarantee ruling, which is 2005/1, which talks about this definition. But the thrust of it is that a common law definition of employee is narrower than what the definition is for superannuation guarantee purposes, which can, in many cases, incorporate contractors into the definition as well. But that's not the case with this exercise of coming up with this headcount on 1 April. The other thing I'd say there too, that if you do have an employer who's part of a wholly owned group of companies, a parent subsidiary style structure, for example, then it's the total employees of all members in that wholly owned group that comes into play. So if the total of all of those grouped entities combined is 20 or more, then they're all in. So meeting that definition of substantial employer will get you into the STP net with effect from 1 July next year. So there's an onus on large employers to quickly get up to speed in this game. In saying all of that, as recently as 29 August, so only a little over a month ago, the Minister for Revenue and Financial Services, Kelly O'Dwyer, released a media statement which said that while it's not yet enacted into law, the Turnbull government is actually going to be pushing hard to introduce a further package of reforms that will bring employers with 19 or less into the STP net as well, but a year later. So the idea would be that the employers that don't meet this definition on 1 April 2018 get another 12 months grace, and then they too join the fold in July of 2019. So I guess to be crystal clear on the key 3 dates there, first of all, 1st of April 2018, that's when you need to do your head count. Are you above or below the 20? If you've got 20 or more staff at that point in time, you're in the net from 1 July 2018. If you've got 19 or fewer, then you're not yet in the net, and depending on what happens with the further package of reforms, you may be caught by the STP net 12 months down the track on 1 July 2019.
So there's a couple of changes there, isn't there? Particularly around effective dates and compulsion. But just to take it back a step, the notion of headcount. So if you've got 2 people sharing a job share arrangement, then that counts as 2 people, not 1.
Yeah, dead right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And earlier we were working on the basis that there was a certain amount of opting in available to particularly, I think, the smaller businesses. So what we're saying now is that essentially 1 July 19, there's a pretty well no carve-outs or no exemptions.
Look, not quite. It's a little bit unclear as to whether there will be some carve-outs or exemptions. The STP legislation makes room for the possibility. Let's put it that way. It speaks in principle terms around the Commissioner having the ability to exempt a class of employers or particular employees, but it doesn't give any prescriptive information on who or what that might be. The only thing we've really got to go on in this particular space thus far is a couple of ATO consultation papers. They've given some indication that the Commissioner will look at employers on a case-by-case basis and possibly look at some carve-outs. Now, that might be things like seasonal employers. It could be things like religious or cultural reasons, or potentially situations where, say, an employer is in bush with bad internet, and they might be able to get a carve-out from the online reporting aspect of STP. So the jury's still out a little bit on that one. It's, as I say, it's made room for the possibility of carve-outs. I don't expect them to be far and wide, but we're still waiting for a little bit more detail as to who might be in play for those.
Mate, can we just start to focus on what some of these changes might be? So we've probably got a lot of people tuned in tonight sort of trying to get their head around, you know, what's actually going to change in their world. Can you give us a bit of insight into that?
Yeah, definitely. And look, most industry commentators have got their own views on the changes that lay ahead, and to be honest, some of the impacts of this are going to be weightier than others. So I guess in readiness for tonight, I sort of compiled what I consider to be my big 10, if you like, the big 10 takeaway points from STP. And again, some are going to have a greater influence than others, but these are probably the 10 that stick in my mind the most as I work through this beast. So I might just run through those in turn, fellas. The first one is that those key reporting elements of ordinary time earnings, salary or wages, and pay-as-you-go withholding are going to be reported and available to the Commissioner in real time. So as your payroll is processed periodically by the employer or by the bookkeeper or by the payroll bureau, that information is going to be immediately transmitted through to the ATO at that point in time. So that's a biggie. It's real-time access to information in sync with every payroll that you run, as opposed to periodical reporting on a monthly or quarterly basis. Number 2 for me is the superannuation contributions, which I touched on before. So the fact that the super funds are going to be reporting to the Commissioner at the same time as they're receiving the contributions from the employer, again adds this second element of real-time reporting to the overall mix. So I guess number 3, when you put the first 2 together, it really does mean that the taxman is in the driver's seat now when it comes to policing super. Because when you think about it, he's got everything he needs to identify non-compliance, because he knows the ordinary time earnings, which is the key number for calculating what superannuation guarantee needs to be. He's then going to know the contribution amounts from the super funds, and therefore should a shortfall arise, he's also going to have the ammunition to work out what the superannuation guarantee charge is going to be, because he's also going to have access to ordinary times earnings information as well. So from the superannuation point of view, it really does put him in a position of ascendancy, I think, moving forward. Number 4, I guess that the takeaway for employers in terms of software is that they're going to need to make sure that they have Single Touch Payroll enabled software to comply with their requirements. So if they're already using software, it's going to mean ensuring that that software is STP compliant. If they're not using software at all, but they're caught by these measures, then it's literally going to be a case of having to stump up and get the necessary software. So there's definitely a practical impact there. Number 5, a small bonus here, I guess, for new employees. They're going to have an ability to complete the likes of tax file number declarations and super choice forms online. So that may certainly be of assistance, particularly in high turnover or fluid industries like the hospitality. I could see that as being a bonus. Number 6, the Single Touch Payroll reports for pay-as-you-go withholding are going to become the approved form for reporting pay-as-you-go withholding. So currently, pay-as-you-go withholding information is reported through business activity statements, but that's really not going to be the case anymore. They may be re-reported on an activity statement, but they're going to be reported in the first instance through these STP-enabled measures. Number 7, employers that have reported their pay-as-you-go withholding obligations via STP will then have that information pre-filled on the BAS. So that stands out to me as being definitely a change moving forward at a practical level. There is talk about the option to pay your pay-as-you-go withholding obligations at the same time as you report them. And the idea there is that we completely align the reporting and the payment functions. That's not a necessity initially, but is potentially a reality down the track. So as far as my list of Big 10 is concerned, I've got that there as number 8 as a possibility. Number 9, touched on this earlier, employers will no longer need to do the annual pay-as-you-go report to the ATO, so a little bit of red tape goes away there. And number 10, nor will they need to do payment summaries. So the theory is that employees moving forward will access their own payroll information, including end-of-year payment summaries via their MyGov account. So this is going to put an onus on employees who do have STP employers to have to set up a MyGov account in order to be able to get at their information both along the way and more critically at the end of the year with regards to fetching their payment summary.
Way back at the start of all this, I recall it was going to have a number of features, one of which was that you report, and great summary there, you do all the reporting with your pay runs live, but you're also going to have to pay at the same time. Now that copped an awful lot of flack from business groups and even political sources, and I believe that was scrapped. But what's the final position on when you physically pay under STP?
Yeah, so as we stand now, Pete, no change. So it's the employer's prerogative to prepay, if you like, that pay-as-you-go withholding or make the payment in tandem with the reporting function. But there's no compulsion on them to do so as we stand. So there's no official change to the due date for pay-as-you-go withholding. So that will continue to just turn on the size of the employer. So for the very big guys, that can be weekly, or for the medium payers, it's monthly, and for everyone else, it's a quarterly basis. So that'll still fall in line with the existing payment due dates for BASs. And similarly, from a superannuation guarantee standpoint, there's no change there either. The payment side of it can still take place no later than the 28th day of the month following the end of the quarter. So the notion, if you like, of payments taking place in tandem with the reporting is just that still. It's a concept, it's an idealism perhaps, but as you say, there was a fair amount of outcry with that for obvious reasons. And as it stands, there's no compulsion on employers to make the payment match the reporting.
So presumably they're going to allow employers, if they want to opt in and have that warm fuzzy feeling of having paid their obligations at the same time as they've done their pay run. If you have to take a stab in the dark, what percentage of people would opt in?
Look, I don't think there'll be a rich vein of uptake for that.
BHP maybe.
To be honest, yeah. I think that, I mean, those big guys are already they're already on a weekly cycle anyway. So if anyone's well positioned to do that, it's them. I would think that for most SMEs in the marketplace, they would shy away from that at the moment. Many of them may be in the good practice of provisioning aside those funds, but I still think that if it's an optional and you can be assured that you're not going to put your hand in the cookie jar, your best bet is still probably to provision those monies in an account and get a bit of interest on it in the meantime, until such time as it becomes compulsory. So I think it'll have very limited uptake, would be my sneaky suspicion at this stage.
Darren, you noted in that previous question that was a little bit of outcry from people looking at that cash flow issues, and I think with any of this, these new initiatives that are brought to bear, there's always going to be some pros and cons from both the employer, the employee, and government perspectives. Have you got a bit of a thought on what some of those pros and cons might be?
Yeah, look, there definitely is. If you drew up a pro and con list, you'd definitely be able to put some on both sides of the ledger, that's for sure. I mean, just touching on that issue of costs straight away, I alluded before to the need for some employers to be either upgrading their accounting software or getting it in the first place. So having your payroll system, Single Touch Payroll enabled is going to definitely impose an additional cost on some of the community. No two ways about it. There is discussion around a very small, almost trivial, non-refundable offset being offered by the government of about $100 for employers to get their STP-enabled software in play. But that may not be too big a consolation. So there's definitely going to be a cost there in getting up to speed in the first place. So that would definitely hit the con list. Swinging to the pro side, that automatic payment summary side of it stands out pretty loud and proud to me in terms of a red tape reduction. So having that information that's being reported along the way, effectively pre-populating payment summary numbers at the end of the year, such that whole payment summary task goes away altogether. I think that's a positive thing. It's normally a task too that's crunched into a small compressed period of time at the start of the new financial year. Bookkeepers and accountants have a lot on their plate at that time of year anyway. So arguably there is some benefit in that one going away. I guess the flip side to that is that it does require the employee to be able to go into an enabled MyGov account to fetch the information. So I think for some years to come, and it'll be probably different across different industries as well, there'll be probably a fair bit of grief in getting employees into the mindset of first of all registering and second of all going and fetching that information at the end of the year. Other cons, look, certainly if the payment side were to be enforced in the years to come so that the payment had to match the reporting, that there's a big cash flow disadvantage in that, and that would really introduce a two-tiered system, if you like. So, paying your pay-as-you-go withholding along the way, and then the remainder of your obligations, whether it's GST or pay-as-you-go instalment on a quarterly basis with your BAS. So there'd be a certain level of complexity and probably a bit of a cash flow crunch in that, without any doubt. But as I said a moment ago, that's not yet a reality. The super, it's a big one, and I guess it's a pro or a con, depending on which side of the fence you live on. But there's no question that the ability for the ATO to match that reporting obligation with the actual contribution made and follow up on any discrepancies is going to be a big one. And for bosses that are unscrupulous or just short of a buck, there's going to be a lot more of a spotlight on them to sort that out, with that information and that power being in the hands of the ATO. I guess another pro, coming back to reporting, there's streamlined reporting onto the BAS. So having that pay-as-you-go withholding number pre-populate on the BAS itself or pre-filled, maybe some advantage in that. Probably not a biggie. And I guess probably for taxpayers and agents, there is a little bit more red tape, as I say, in just getting both the client base that you have schooled up on this, and also getting their employees in turn schooled up on the important function that the MyGov account is going to play moving forward. So, there's going to be some skilling up of both clients and their employees in that regard. I guess as a final con too, I see there's going to be greater scrutiny on businesses, and it comes back to that information that's in the hands of the employer, of the ATO rather, of the employer's affairs. So I think there's going to be greater scrutiny. There's going to be certainly heightened risk of audits and reviews if errors are discovered. So I think more and more employers, particularly those that, shall we say, a bit looser around their reporting and record keeping, they're going to be well and truly in the crosshairs moving forward.
Mate, as I see it, it's also, there's a lot more pros for government than cons, as I see it. From their side of the fence, they're going to see a streamlining of their own admin as everyone reports in the same electronic manner. So that's going to dramatically reduce their occupation or headcounts towards servicing this system. It's got to improve their ability to audit, and you touched on that. Outside that, they're also going to have the ability, as I see it, to have a greater input into social security fraud. It gets, there'll be some people that will volunteer dough up in front, so they're going to get some dough in faster. As to how much, who knows, but there'll be some of that. And it's got to improve the integrity of the super guarantee system. So as I see it, the government have got a lot more pros and cons, as that's how I read it.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, it's as simple as this. It's more information in their hands, but even more critically, it's more information in their hands sooner. And so I think that really puts them in a power position. When you look at the stated pros and cons of this, some of them are a little bit more aesthetic and illusory than others. Having a pay-as-you-go withholding number, for example, roll through onto your BAS, it's probably more a nicety than a biggie. Whereas I think, those things that you touched on a moment ago in terms of what the government will enjoy out of it, they are real advantages moving forward for them and real game changers.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to move on a little bit. Just having a bit of a look. Have you got a sense of where you believe the software companies are at with this? I mean, the whole system revolves around the software companies playing ball, as I see it. If they don't play ball, then there's no platform on which to administer this thing. So any sense where they're at the moment?
Look, they're a little bit tight-lipped about it. I mean, most of them have put out press releases to say we're working on it, and ABN has certainly had discussions with the major software houses, and most of them are well advanced with beta projects at the moment. So they've got a select group of inner sanctum users mucking around with what they've built so far. So, I think all the major software houses realise that this is a non-negotiable. If they don't have their software up to speed and have it up to speed in time, they're going to lose subscribers. So it's a given that I think that it will be there. As to what point it's going to come in, when it's going to be available for testing by the wider audience, as I say, they're a little bit tight-lipped about that at the moment. So I think probably they're all just bunkered down in beta phase at the moment, and I expect a fair bit more to roll through, probably by the end of the calendar year or early next calendar year, I suspect.
Yeah.
Now, Darren, obviously the legislation, etc., is all targeted at small business and larger business communities, but the reality is that most of those, or many of those businesses, will be engaging our members, our bookkeepers, to assist in the transition to single touch payroll. Can you give us a bit of an idea of what the impact is going to be on bookkeepers who deal in the payroll space?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be one, isn't there, Kelvin? And I think when you take a step back from it, you should see it, if you're in the bookkeeping space, as very much a positive opportunity, particularly over the next 1, 2, 3 years as this gets rolled out across potentially all taxpayers. So, or all business taxpayers anyway. So I think it is an opportunity, and I think progressive bookkeepers should be viewing it as that. On one hand, there might be a little bit less work to be done, which might otherwise be chargeable work, say, in terms of production of payment summaries and the like. So there's potentially a little bit of a loss of work there. But I think on the other side, there's a real chance here for bookkeepers to get on the front foot, both with their existing clients and also with future clients, if they can promote loud and proud that they're across all the STP changes and the software changes that go with it. It's a good positive message to send to, as I say, both existing and prospective clients. So I think the reality is that for the next 8 or 9 months, bookkeepers that have those 20 or more employee clients, those significant employers as the legislation refers to them as, are going to be very busy, both testing the software when it's available and getting their employer clients STP ready. So doing that headcount on 1 April, working out which side of the line that they fall into, identifying the implementation date, and if they are going to be a 1/7/18 start, then actually getting the software enabled in readiness for that, and maybe even running a little bit of education or training for their clients as well. The payroll function will typically rest with the bookkeeper, but the employer or the business owner is going to want, in most cases, some level of awareness of what's changing. And so there's an opportunity for the bookkeeper to get before the employer there as well, before the client, and give them a little bit of a cook's tour of the changes as well. And then obviously if the announcement by Kelly O'Dwyer plays out and those that are under 20 employees also come into the net 12 months later, well, that's a very big deal. And that's going to mean that just about every business client you have, assuming they have at least one employee, is going to be in the fold. So I think that if that plays out, then that period between July of 18 and July of 19 could be an enormously busy one for bookkeepers of SME businesses.
And I think you've actually nailed that. I think it's going to be very, very, very serious for bookkeepers out there at the moment. They're going to have, as you say, you would like the chances of government to get this across. You can't see it being political not to get it passed. So I would suspect that, work on the presumption that it will get through. That being the case, bookkeepers, as you say, going to be in a great position. More information. How do they suck up as much information as they can to be in a really good place when this comes through?
Yeah, again, a little bit of a watch this space, Pete. I think the ATO are going to put some information out on the drip. There's no question about that. And they've already got some good content out there. Software companies are going to do the same. And hopefully the good ones will look at it both as a concept as well as what their piece of software is going to do to deal with it. I guess as an organisation, what ABN is really going to be striving hard to do over the coming months is to curate that content from all those different sources and to bring it together for our member base. So I would urge everyone to stay tuned with our technical bulletins and our buzzers and all of our emails, and potentially don't want to preempt here, guys, but I'm guessing maybe a follow-up STP Bookkeeper Radio maybe in the new year as this thing draws nearer, where a little bit more of that detail might be to hand, would be a must-see event as well. So, yeah, I think have your finger in the pie, I guess, with all of those sources, whether it's the ATO or the software houses that you're involved with, but as well as that, stay pretty close to ABN. As I say, it'll be our job to curate all of that noise and try and bring it through in as good a form as possible as we can for you.
Yeah, we're speaking it through here today, and you were in your green room, and we same thing. We figure this will be reoccurring in probably in the new calendar year, once we've got more legislative certainty, and there's going to be a lot of detail. This is to play out so that bookkeepers are well armed. I think Kelvin's got a poll he'd like to run across STP question. Big fella, do you want to?
Yeah, so just pretty shortly, we're just going to start looking at a couple of the questions that have filtered through as we've been talking to Darren. So if you do have a question, now's the time to tap it in, and we'll see if we can get through as many as we can. But in the meantime, while you are tapping that, I wouldn't mind just running a little poll here, just around where people's comfort levels are and dealing with the STP legislation. So basically the question is, could you share your comfort level in dealing with Single Touch Payroll and rolling it out to your clients? Are you very comfortable and all over it? Do you have a good understanding, just waiting on some more detail from the ATO and software? basic understanding or shifting nervously in your seat? Can you let us know what your comfort level is? Give you a few more seconds to get into that. Vote still coming through. Still there. All right, slowing down now, so I might just show the results. So I'll just end that polling, and we'll just share those results with you. Hopefully, they're coming up on your screens. I can't see it coming up on my master screen, but anyway, I'll just share the results with you there. We basically only got a couple of % of people who are comfortable, so that says that there's certainly a lot more work to be done by the ATO and the software houses in releasing information. We've got about 46% who say they have a good understanding of it, but just want that detail. And interestingly, we've got another 46% who say they've got a basic understanding but need a lot more detail. And then we've got the 6% of people who are shifting nervously in their seats and need a lot more time to get across this. So,
and I was watching you in the polling. You were moving into your seat a little bit.
Mate, I was shifting nervously as well.
We want to move into some Q&A.
We do. Let's start off some Q&A, mate.
Has anyone? Have you told anyone that can raise their hand? Well, we've taken a few questions which we'll start on, but if you want.
If you'd like to have a live question or a comment, just hit the raise your hand button, and I'll promote you onto the panel, and you can ask your questions live of the team here.
There's a couple of questions I saw come through, and one was for the building trade. Do contractors under voluntary agreements count in the employee headcount? My understanding is it's an opt-in voluntary agreement. You can shout me down if I'm wrong, Darren, but as a VA, you probably wouldn't meet the definition of a common law employee. You probably, it's an optional, maybe you get close to a statutory employee, but I don't think you'd meet the definition of common law employee that they've put out. Agree?
I'd agree with that, Pete. I think based on that definition that's in that 2005 SG ruling, then I would say yes, you would be potentially caught for voluntary withholding and super and other things, but you wouldn't form part of the headcount.
Yeah, I've got one here I know the answer to, so I'm going to grab it. It talked about do I need any qualifications, special qualifications to deal with STP? And at a regulatory sense, the answer is no. If you've got your certificate for and are registered as a BAS agent, you've already got the qualifications to deal with PAYG, super, which are the BAS provisions. It's not to say that qualifications in payroll won't help you; they will. But at a legal sense, your BAS agent's ticket is sufficient. But you might, if you're going to delve into this space in greater depth, it might be worth investigating some qualifications in payroll, and there are some available on the ABN website.
But we've got a guest panelist on here, Clayton Oates. Good afternoon, Clayton. Mate, have you got your microphone on there, mate? We just can't hear you there. You got your microphone on?
Clayton, we got no sound, dude.
We've got no sound.
He's got mute on. Have another go, Clayton. Nah.
No, got no sound, mate.
We're gonna have to give you the. We're gonna play.
Oh, there he is. Have you got us, mate? Can you hear us?
No.
We got no sound, big fella. We'll have to, yeah. All right, you got another question there?
Yeah, another question. Well, if Clayton can find his sound. We had a question there which is going to affect a lot of people, is around mums and dads, small companies, in-house employees where there were certain exemptions or concessions for pay-as-you-go withholding dealing. Are small companies with mum and dad or family members exempted? My understanding, Darren, is the answer is probably no, unless they fall into this yet to be clarified exemption pool of any manner, but at this stage, probably unlikely.
Yeah, Pete, I've seen nothing around a carve out for micro or closely held, as we sometimes refer to them. When it's spoken about potential carve outs, as I said earlier, it's alluded to more obscure things like religion, cultural, poor internet reception, those types of things, as opposed to just sheer size or lack of. So I would be surprised if there was a carve out for micro.
Mate, we've got one here from Karen as well, just asking the question, if you do have less than 20 employees, can you start on the 1st of July 18 if you wish? So in other words, do you have to wait to 1 July 19?
The feeling I've got from a couple of things I've read is that you will be able to dive into the pond earlier from 1 July 18. I do expect we're going to see some more information on that in the coming months, but I think that from the ATO's point of view and from the government's point of view, the more the merrier, and they're not looking at holding people back from this regime. And so if you want to get in voluntarily, if you like, at an earlier point than you otherwise would have to, I'm pretty sure they'll be waiting there with open arms. So I have seen suggestions of that, and I imagine we'll see quite a bit more on that in the lead up to that April 1 line in the sand date.
Had one question there also from a listener talking about the options for getting involved in Single Touch Payroll, and asking the question whether the tax department plan to allow agents, BAS agents, tax agents and the like, to lodge Single Touch Payroll stuff through the BAS agent or tax agent portal, and avoid the need to upgrade into payroll software. Simple answer is no. That won't be the case, and if they did, it wouldn't be a horribly reliable system from what I've seen of recent times. So you will be forced into STP compliant software.
And I guess the difficulty there, Pete, is that the information that's being gathered via STP is very granular in nature, so it's capturing individual employee details, both gross wages and ordinary times earnings, etc. Whereas most lodgements through the portal at the moment are aggregated data, and certainly not at an individual level. So I imagine that might be the barrier to it being a possibility through something like the portal.
Yeah. There was a question there on franchisees. Are franchisees considered to be part of a group? I think the simple answer is there, probably not, unless the franchisee was owned by the franchisor, in which case that might be grouped. But franchisees of themselves, independently operated franchises, wouldn't be grouped. Agree?
Yeah, agree. The legislation speaks quite specifically about wholly owned companies, so that wouldn't be the case for a franchisee or a typical franchisee-franchisor relationship. Yeah.
There's a number of people expressing doubt as to whether this is all going to fly from the 1st of July coming from any number of fronts, from the tax office being ready. I'm sure that won't be the case. Employers not being ready by not having adopted STP compliant software in time, or possibly even payroll options not being there. So we've seen a lot of changes instigated by the tax office, most recently simplified BAS. That didn't go so smoothly. This is a bigger undertaking than that. So I guess no answer to this one, but we cross our fingers and we hope.
SuperStream had a few failure to launches in its journey too, didn't it? So
it did indeed.
Not out of the question, I would say.
No.
I think we've got to work on. I think we've got to work on the presumption that it's gonna be there, but it's not. I'm not going to say it's an impossibility.
Yeah.
All right. Look, we're getting close to time. There's an awful lot of questions there as they're streaming through. We're just sort of trying to keep a bit of a track on ones that have a bit of a common theme. Look, one thing that we are pretty conscious of is that there's going to be a huge amount of questions in this space over the next sort of 2 to 3 months as the ATO and the software houses continue to work together to get their information out and their systems working appropriately. We do have access to some specialists in the ATO, and as Darren alluded to earlier, we might see if we can get one of those guys onto a radio show early in the new year, as a lot more of this stuff's going to come out. What we will do, however, is with the questions that we haven't got to tonight, and there's not a lot of them that are actually coming through along the same theme. They're very, very different questions. What we'll do is we'll actually jot all these questions down, and I think you're attending the Australian Payroll Conference in a couple of weeks' time.
I am indeed, yep. And we have the Assistant Commissioner in charge of the line, John Shepherd, so we can put questions directly to him. We might even haven't asked him yet. We might even ask him whether he can do a radio session with us. In the new year. Yeah. So,
I think some of these questions we'll start to sort of put them down and try and get some common themes into them, and maybe present those to John, and hopefully we can get a lot of these questions answered from the horse's mouth. Whether there is a Q&A style paper well hidden on the ATO tax office site at the moment, which I found the other day. It dates back a little bit, but it looks like they're updating it progressively. So as some of these things come to bear and they clarify them, a lot of them simply say, we'll take that under advisement, and we're working towards an outcome with that. So a lot of the questions as we're going through them here tonight, the answers just simply aren't known, because as I said earlier, the legislation is still very much sand as far as the ATO and the software houses are concerned. So
we might even find that some of the questions that we haven't got to tonight are dealt with in the white paper. So we put out a white paper which is going to be made available freely to anyone who's registered for Bookkeeper Radio, and you can get that from the ABN website once the video is uploaded and live in its recorded form. So it'll be there for free download, and you might find that also answers some of the questions we didn't quite get to.
Yeah, yep. We've just sort of been sent through a Q&A actually saying, have we seen the questions in the chat room? Look, we don't actually monitor the chat room. We'll make sure that we capture those before we head off tonight, and make sure that they find their way onto that question list as well, that we might present to John Shepherd in a couple of weeks' time. All right, well, look, that pretty much brings us to a close for this evening. Just a couple of things that we wanted to mention. I guess the first one was that this Australian Payroll Association is having its annual conference in 2 weeks' time on October 20th in the Convention Centre, I believe it is, in Sydney.
Darling Harbour, yep.
Yep. So that's on October the 20th. Australian Payroll Association have advised us that they're prepared to supply us with a small number of half-price tickets to the event. So, mate, do you want to tell us a little bit about where we can find those?
Yeah, the discount is significant. I've been to Australian Payroll Conference in the past. It's a extremely thorough payroll event. So if you're looking to get into payroll space, I can commend it to you. We get on extremely well with the directors there, and they've kindly offered a limited number of half-price tickets. So if you can make it and are interested in the space, it would be worth attending. I do believe they actually have at least one session on Single Touch Payroll with John Shepherd from the tax office, and there's plenty of other good payroll content if you're going to be delving into this space. So it's a really good day if you think you're going to make payroll your home. So,
all right.
And you can get that. Where can you get it? You can get that from from our Facebook page. So on our Facebook page, when the video gets loaded,
that's the Bookkeeper Radio Facebook page.
Bookkeeper Radio. So go Bookkeeper Radio, get into Facebook, type in Bookkeeper Radio. The site will come up. You will see in there an ability to download the agenda if you want to see what's going to be on, and you'll also have a link there to take advantage of the kind offer from the people at Australian Payroll Association. There's a code you need to quote, and that'll be on the Facebook page. So I can commend that to you.
All right, thanks, Pete. Just a couple of other things to note before we head off. The 2017 Bookkeeping Business Benchmark Survey questionnaires have been released this afternoon, so I really encourage you to jump onto that. The link was in our news feeds earlier tonight, but if you miss those news feeds, then hopefully in your inbox you will see an invitation to participate in the 2017 benchmark survey. So that's a really thorough survey delving deep into the financial sector of the bookkeeping industry. So I really encourage you to have a go at that survey. It takes around 30 minutes to complete, and a complimentary copy is made available to every participant who completes that survey in full. So if you want to do that, you'll see that information in your inboxes as well. Also released this week was the Save the Date announcement for ABN's Bookkeeper event conference in 2018.
Hooray.
So this year we're heading to the next year rather, we're heading to the brand new conference centre at SeaWorld on the beautiful Gold Coast. And the dates for that will be the 12th and 13th of October 2018. So make sure you mark that in your calendars as well. All right, well, look, that brings us to an end of another Bookkeeper Radio show. I think it was a tough topic tonight in that we're still working with a few moving parts here. Of course, we thank tonight's expert, Darren Hagarty. Mate, thanks for your time tonight. Really appreciate you joining us and sharing your wisdom.
No, my pleasure, guys. It's been fun.
Thank you,
and I think, as you say, mate, it's shifting sand a bit, isn't it? And I think, probably my message to every listener tonight is just stay in the loop on this thing over the coming months. And I think you'll see a lot more flesh put on the bones in that time. And you'll have a lot more answers to these questions as time wears on. But stay in the loop and keep your ear to the ground in the meantime. And that's the best advice I can give you.
Yeah, great advice. All right, well, look, that brings us to an end. Our next Bookkeeper Radio, we host Dave Dimment, Australian Taxation Officer Assistant Commissioner and Chair of the Tax Practitioners Board, Ian Taylor, where we're going to delve into the regulator's perspective on cyber security. So we look forward to joining you then, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Good night.